je vous souhaite la bienvenue à cette séance de l'École des Modernités, à l'Institut Giacometti. La conférence de ce soir sera en anglais et donc je finirai ma présentation en anglais pour présenter notre conférencière. Mais avant cela, je voulais signaler que ce programme de l'École des Modernités, qui a pour ambition de revisiter, d'interroger de manière nouvelle la période moderne entendue au sens des musées entre 1905 et 1960, a rarement à ce point l'occasion de présenter des artistes inconnus, disparus, des histoires de l'art. C'est le cas de Maire Männik, qui fera l'objet de la conférence de ce soir. I will switch in English, since the lecture is given in English by Juta Kivimäe. I'm very happy to welcome her here. Juta Kivimäe is an art historian. She's the director of the sculpture collection of the Museums of Art of Estonia in Tallinn, and she's just coming from Tallinn in Paris. Miss Kivimäe wrote many books on modern sculpture, modern art, and she also curated exhibitions, mainly at the Museum of Art of Estonia, on those same subject. Among them, I'd like to mention the first Estonian women sculpture. That's the title of an exhibition which was subtitled Addenda to the Fate of the Artists and Their Work, that took place in 2014 at the Museum of Art in Estonia. Another exhibition created by Ms. Kivimäe was Jaak Soansi's sculpture. Maybe I'm pronouncing incorrectly the name, and I apologize for this if it's the case. It was in 2016 at the Museum of Tallinn, and first and foremost, she curated in 2019, and that's the subject of tonight's lecture, the groundbreaking exhibition on Maire Männik, Maire Männik, an Estonian legend in Paris, which was the first to really present a comprehensive retrospective of a work. Tonight's lecture is entitled Maire Männik, an Estonian legend in Paris, and it's the occasion to look again at the work of these sculptors who stayed in Paris from Estonia, came to Paris in the beginning of the 50s to study in Ossip Zadkine's studio and to exhibit also. So she went to the Grande Chaumière and she exhibited in many salons in Paris. And until 2019, this sculptor was quite unknown. Even, I think, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, in Estonia. So I'm very happy to make this work known again through the lecture that Juta Kivimäe is giving tonight. So I'll let you present us this work, and I'm very happy to welcome you at the Institute. Thank you.
Paris, Maire Männik, and the death of Maire Männik in early autumn in heat wave of Paris in 5th September 2003 was very unexpected for many of her admirers, because only a year ago her retrospective solo exhibition has taken place at the Estonian Embassy in Paris and the Swedish Cultural Center. And our president of Estonian Republic, awarded her the Order of White Star for her work in promoting Estonianness in Paris, like he said. The order was presented at the embassy with the greatest solemnity in connection with the artist's 80th jubilee. And Estonian history, art history, Maire Männik is known as a sculptor who established her career in Paris during the years after World War II. And she was a member of French Union of Sculptors and also the International Art Medal Federation. She was also a medal artist in his old year. And she was also one of the most outstanding Estonian sculptors to work abroad during the post-World War decades. In her modernist creation, she combined details based on nature motifs with the elements of abstract forms that grew up of the art of the 50s. She liked this style, the abstract expressionism, and the sculpture participated actively in the French art scene and left behind portraits, abstract compositions, also two public sculptures, and the project of bas-reliefs and commemorative medals. Much of her work reached to Estonia after her death. The Estonian audience knew that in Paris is acting an Estonian female sculptor, but they did not know about her works. In the context of Estonian art, she was created rare, airy, even graphically compositions, and here perhaps there is indeed a reason to draw parallels with the impulses that have come from Giacometti's work. And in the autumn 2003, after the artist had passed away, I visited both of the artist's Paris studios as a representative of our museum, Estonian Art Museum, at the invitation of Maire Männik's son, Erki Männik, who is with us today in grey. And Erki donated a large part of his mother's works to the Republic of Estonia, and this gift was shared between two museums, the Estonian Art Museum and a little bit not so great museum in Tartu Art Museum, and Tartu was the birthplace of Maire Männik. And in 2090, at last, Kumu Art Museum's exhibition Estonian Legend in Paris, Maire Männik symbolically fulfills. Here is Maire Männik with the order in embassy, and here is the exhibition of her in our museum. It was a very beautiful exhibition, a most beautiful in my career in museum for 40 years. And it was symbolically, this exhibition fulfills one of the wishes of Maire Männik and also her son to organize an exhibition in Estonia. All artists have drawn something important from their childhood and surroundings, from the social circumstances where their real roots are. And young Maire Männik he grew up in a very prominent Estonian intellectual family for her era. Her father, Hans Männik, was a well-known Estonian intelligent, and he was the owner and founder of a big publishing house, Nature in Estonian, Loodus, in the year 1920. And mother, Lydia Männik, was very much educated woman. She was first Estonian female doctor, and she works all his life as a medical doctor. And here you can see the ruins of Tartu, very old medieval Gothic cathedral, and I think that all the arcades in Maire Männik creation, the roots are here in Tartu. And here you can see the enclosed picture and in the Tartu Cathedral Park, and Maire is the first from the left young girl, and in the city of Tartu, after graduating from high school in 41, here you can see all the family except father. The Soviet troops occupied Estonia in 40, and the publishing house was taken out of, and the father was arrested. And after the year 41, nobody knows about his later destiny. We even don't know the year of his death. And in her youth, he studied to learn sculpture, and the main teacher was a long-time director of the art school of Tartu, a famous modernist sculptor, Anton Starkov. He's also famous in Tartu, but he got his education in abroad, and also studied in Paris studios, and the style of teaching in Tartu Art College, it was very, very the same as in Chaumière or Beaux Arts. And here is the first sculpture. What we know from 43, it is a standing boy's figure in plaster, and here the young Maire Männik had the skills to do the imitation of bronze. It is the skill to paint such a way sculptures. And it was a very bad time for studying in Estonia, because the war was going to Estonia, and all the art schools and university, they were shut, and Maire got an advice from his teacher, Anton Starkov, to go to Germany, to go to Munich, because Starkov himself in his youth, he also studying in Munich, but it wasn't a very good idea, because the war was going to his end, and the Russian troops were vigorously going ahead to Germany. And here you can see some portraits for the year 44 in Erkki Männik's collection. There are a dozen of children portraits, and Maire was in the same refugee train. He is going by the train from Germany to Denmark in 44, and this very little child, it was a kindergarten or something, they traveled in the same train. And after this very awful train trip, he had reached in Stockholm in 45, and in Stockholm he started to study in Department of Humanities at Stockholm University, and also from 47 he studied also in the evening courses at the Stockholm School of Applied Arts. We can see the first works in Sweden, and in Sweden there was a very lively art life of Estonian refugees, and they had numerous exhibitions in Sweden, in Stockholm and so on, and Maire found a good teacher. It was a Swedish sculptor who acting in the modernist style, but not in abstract way, but in figurative way. And Maire's first works in Sweden, they were the little statues and portraits of children. And two very interesting works creating during this period, we have to highlight it. One of them was unknown political prisoner for 50, and the other is the world on the open palm. And the unknown political prisoner is dated to 1950, but I myself, I think that maybe she have done it a little bit later in her Paris period. But the sculpture, the world on the palm, open palm, this sculpture was designed as a human hand symbolized the 5 continents connected by Sabena Airlines. It was a sculpture competition organized by Sabena Airlines, and we have only this little sketch. We don't know about the real sculpture. And of course, she dreaming about Paris, but she had no money enough. He was working in a film as an official, but the income was too small. And then in one exhibition he could sell some works, and it was great money for her, and she decided to go Brussels, and as he has written about her travel plan, I made a quick decision. I would first go to Brussels, and on my way back to the Netherlands, she has some school friends in Netherlands, and maybe from Brussels to Paris. And it was a very good idea. While traveling to Paris in 1952, she has previously sent a letter to Eduard Wiiralt, a very famous Estonian graphic who already living in Paris at that time, and they together visited La Rive Gauche, and Wiiralt told her about the Sorbonne and all the famous artist studios, and they reached to the shut door of Chaumière. It was a holiday day. And after a couple of days, Maire Männik decided to go back, and she opened this door and firstly met with Zadkine. There was a very sad thing too. While spending time together in Paris, neither Eduard Wiiralt nor Maire Männik could have foreseen that Wiiralt was to die there just in 2 years. And here you can see Maire Männik, who designed his grave memorial bearing the artist's signature at Père Lachaise cemetery. And even today, when arriving in Paris, every Estonian intellectual feels obliged to find this grave at the Père Lachaise cemetery land. During the first stay in Paris, Maire has recalled extremely emotionally. She was a very emotional person too. When the studio was open, I didn't know much about who Zadkine was, only that he made sculptures different from ordinary ones. When I asked if it was possible to work in the studio for a week or two, I was happy when the answer was yes. The smell of clay penetrated my nose, and the smell of such a well-known studio, it was too much intoxicated me. And he asked Zadkine what his thoughts were. Probably she saw some photos about portraits and figures, and Zadkine only replied that one had to come and live in Paris. He's, like Maire Männik said, his proofreading classes on Friday morning were real rallies. His critique was very interesting, which Maire shared, which he shared in several languages, because students were from several countries, not only from Paris. She said, I already had a strong desire to return to Zadkine's studio because apart from many sculptures, teachers, I found that this was the real man from whom I really had something to learn. And nowadays, we know that Zadkine was the world name of modernist sculpture even before the Second World War. As a Jew, he was forced to spend 4 years in exile in New York, and returning to Paris in 1945, he decided to open an art school in a studio at 70 Rue Notre-Dame-des-Champs, near his own house. Maire was very happy to go back in year 1953. As in case the many other Estonian artists who studied in foreign metropolises, Maire Männik, as she herself said, her biggest problem was, and in fact its problem was remained until the end of her life, chronic lack of money. In summer, she tried to work in Sweden until November, because in northern lands all the schools started in September. But here in Paris in November, and teaching in the Paris studios did not begin until November, and in September and November and October she worked in Stockholm, and she had been able to raise 750 francs and traveled to Paris with some doubts, with slight hesitation. It was very little money for studying. And she has recalled, in December I modeled my rice picker. Here we can see the atelier Zadkine, and Maire Männik is on his right, and Ossip Zadkine a little bit in here in his house in his youth, and the rice picker. It was a Vietnamese girl in the rice picker's position, before Christmas, as he writes, before Christmas, André Sussi, the chairman of the Zadkine School Board, and also Sussi was an owner of bronze casting workshop. He organized a year-end tour of the studio, and my work and that of a couple of other students was found to be of interest, extent that we were given free studies until spring. Free studies until spring. She was intoxicated. She could work now in Zadkine's studio until spring without any financial troubles. She described Zadkine's comment and criticism. Zadkine said to her students, "Pas mal, not bad. It must have already means that it was all quite good." The rice picker, which is currently being modeled and posed by a natural Vietnamese girl, it was a appreciated by the decision makers in the Zadkine studio. Maire was extremely happy. Maire studied in Zadkine studio as a student of the Académie de la Grande Chaumière, but mainly due to lack of money, she also entered to École nationale supérieure des beaux-arts, a national art school, free of charge, and Beaux-Arts students were also given an official meal card with a discounted meal, and it was a problem for her. Without money in Paris alone, Männik was known to complete her studies with Professor Gimond stone carvings courses, and she recalled, Beaux-Arts and I came as if by accident. I submitted my documents and photos to Beaux-Arts and was admitted to Gimond's studio. I got a student card and cheap food. Here you can see all the student cards of that time, and but I immediately went to Zadkine studio in December. For that I came to Paris to be Zadkine student. I went back to the Beaux-Arts stone carving studio in June and July, when I not longer had the opportunity to work in the Zadkine studio because there was no more money. Männik has often said that her studies in Zadkine studio meant a lot to her. She recalls, in short, I was suited for a same wavelength, the same nature, the same critique, and the inspiration be offered to young sculptors in his studio. The free, slightly constructive modeling style, the great generalization, and the elegant poses of the models, and the unique, strange coherence in the composing with the human figure, and related objects, chairs, sculptural stands, and so on, which are also perfectly captured in Männik's works, were characteristic of Zadkine's modeling studio. The importance the artist gave to these relatively small format modernist studio works. You can see the studio works now about from the years of 53 to 55. Männik has placed the studio works also from these years in the list of her free works. He did herself that kind of list of her works, and the studio works are here. It turned out the financial problems related to high fees were also revolved together with the studio manager. While studying in Zadkine studio, Maire Männik got the possibility to be the assistant of Zadkine in the studio. It meant escaping fees. She has described her responsibilities in the studio as an assistant. The studio started at 9 o'clock in the morning. The assistant had to be there an hour earlier, heat the oven in cold weather, sweep the floors and yard, and get the students ready for modeling. She also had to look for models who change every few weeks. And Zadkine remained a very important person for the rest of her life. He was both an ideal figure of an artist, a great artist for her, and a great sculptor, and as well Zadkine was a father figure for Maire Männik. A very serious professional breakthrough came to Maire Männik's cultural life in Paris in the year 55. Together with other students at the Zadkine Gallery, Zadkine Studio, she was invited to perform at an open-air exhibition in the garden of Rodin Museum with l'Association de la Jeune Sculpture. It was a very famous association of sculptors in that time, and this association was established in 49, and they were known as its innovative outdoor exhibition. Outdoor exhibition were not only in Paris, Paris a modern thing, but also in other European centers like London and in Antwerp. In the Antwerp there was very famous outdoor sculptures biennales. In 55, Männik firstly presented in open air her sculpture Prometheus in the garden of Rodin Museum, and the Prometheus was only 1.5 meters tall. This was the minimum dimension for an open air sculpture exhibition, and under the large trees of this garden, Maire saw that his sculpture is so small and fragile, and it was her first work using a graphic silhouette, and marked the beginning of a new journey. Perhaps we could talk here modestly about the influence of Giacometti nature, because this work is created on the metal framework and in the same technique as Giacometti did his works. A few years later, the term holds a serrated lightning bolt, which is solved as an airy graphic line. A few years later, the figure holds a serrated lightning bolt, which is solved as an airy graphic line. A few years later, the term graphic sculpture appeared in the terminology of Männik foreign Estonian reception. Estonian has a possibility in Sweden to have an Estonian paper besides Swedish papers, and the term was probably coined by an Estonian art historian and critic working in Sweden. She was Eevi End. In an article she dedicated to the artist the artist 50th anniversary, she write about the fine graphic forms in Maire Männik's works. And also another composition, the birds in cage. It is also one of the first works in the same technique. And Maire Männik was in the fourth Antwerp Sculpture Biennale with this work. It was in Mittelheim Park in Antwerp, as it was one of the largest international sculpture exhibition in the artistic life of Maire Männik. She performed this sculpture, and it was a possibility she performed at this exhibition alongside well-known French sculptors. At the Biennale, French sculptures was represented by the great masters, both living and having passed away: Jean Sculpture, Émile Bordel, Charles Despio, Julio González, Henry Lawrence, Aristide Maillol, Antoine Pevsner, Auguste Renoir, and Ossip Zadkine himself were here, and Maire Männik together with the great artist. We can see here the new sculptures of Maire in 50s, and also you can see how she did the drawings before she acted as a sculptor. She always did the drawings, and on this exhibition in Estonia we had a large part of drawings here exhibited. They belong to Erki Männik, and because it was a time of a disease, the drawings are since in our museum. The first appearance at the open-air exhibition in 55 changed the nature of her sculpture technique. In 55 there was a noticeable change in Maire Männik's approach to sculpture and also in relation to the material of the sculpture. Maire Männik's close friend Vladimir Karasjev-Orgussaar, an Estonian film director and refugee who escaped to Paris from Soviet Estonia, described his visit with Maire Männik to a hardware store. It was a store of iron bars and all kind of building materials. And Maire Männik, in the first years of his life in Paris, on the first years of Karasjev-Orgussaar life in Paris, in 1979, when the sculpture completed one of the last large-scale composition, they went to this store where Männik took a small letter or small piece of paper from her handbag with a design of sketched with a ballpoint pen, and told the salesman to bring several long, heavy iron bars. French workers call such thick bars the cow tails. My French is very bad, but in French, côte de vache. Yes, Männik had them placed on the floor. They were very long, 6 meters long, and very heavy. And she herself was very ladylike, a small woman, very fragile, and with very strong hands. And here on the floor, she began to bend the shapes according to her imagination. When they left the store, the bars had taken a shape and had to be delivered to the studio where the sculpture began to connect her material with wire, and only with wire. Maire Männik never used the welding machine, but connected heavy construction with wires. And due to this technical feature, the metal parts of its structures are not rigidly connected but move slightly, which means that over time, due to the inevitable movement of works about the transport and exhibition, installation, and so on, some parts of the rigid plaster covering the whole structure are detached from metal. And she loved to expose works in open air, and they were plaster works. And in open air there is a lot of rain and so on. When these sculptures reached into our museum, the restorers have to work some years. The sculptures have also partially lost their origin balance. Perhaps Maire Männik hoped to cast them in bronze over time, but due to her lack of money, only a few sculptures have been cast in bronze. And one of the first sculptures to made in this technique, apart from Prometheus and birds in a cage, was the Forest Lovers. You can see it. It is very beautiful and was a favor of all little visitors of Maire Männik exhibition. You can see here a lush of the big tree and deers and some natural paths, but it was not all about the nature, but it is halfly abstracted work. And the other work is the best of her creation, I think so. It is the work with the name sounding perspective, perspective sonore. It is to plaster work and very high. The height is 3.5 meters. And it is the sculpture we know about only thanks to photos. Unfortunately, this great work burned down in a fire of a warehouse of artworks. And here it is a very beautiful photo, and a well-known fashion photographer of this time, Willy Maywald, photographed Maire Männik in the courtyard of Zadkine's studio during the process of creating this work, and the composition with especially rich details would seem to represent the entire agenda of the sculptor at that time. Closeness to nature, the soft meandering elements of vegetative life growing out of the sculpture's construction. We can nearly hear the song of birds in the forests, sunshine through the trees, and a dozen of other associative elements from a rich, harmonious whole with an irregular combination of images. Openworks partial constructions contains occasionally recognizable realistic elements such as images of people, birds, plants, butterflies, and the sun in this time in her works. And the author herself had considered her sculptures to be the messengers of a world living in balance with nature. This was the opposite of the deepening reality in cities, as Männik saw it. These walls and interiors and disturbed nature were glass and concrete drains everywhere, and eventually they suffocated us. And there you can see three works from this time, and also in open air, as a plaster in open air. In 1957, she participated in the exhibition of the l'Association de la Jeune Sculpture in the garden of Rodin Museum, and in 1961 again at the Rodin Museum garden, and probably with a large-scale abstract composition back and forth compiled in the same year. She also performed with a well-known association in the summer 62. In summer 62, she performed the sculpture École des Arcades in Parc Floral de Paris, and this majestic work here, this majestic work was very beautiful in this park, and all the Zadkine studio was very famous, and all the students were invited to perform at the Simone Badimer Art Gallery, where André Sussi presented the Young Sculpture Award. Sussi Frères, it was a casting center. It was active from 1939 to 1970, collaborated with Ossip Zadkine, and apparently they kept an eye on his talented students. In 1954, the best of this year was the sculpture The Cyclist, l'homme à la bicyclette. There were some years she also performed for the first time at the Swedish Club in Paris, and she performed this work in Swedish Club, and the first solo exhibition of Männik ended this year, having taken place during the Christmas holidays in Sweden at Gävle Town, at the Gävle Town Museum. In 1955, she was invited to perform at the Gävle Art Museum for Christmas, and André Sussi, the owner of the bronze casting workshop, agreed to cast some of her works in bronze for the exhibition in Sweden. And in her first solo exhibition at Gävle Museum, Männik exhibited 4 sculptures: a woman in a chair, forest lovers, orchid, and the cyclist. And also he firstly exposed motif, the late visitor, La Visiteur du Soir. It was a bas-relief. And it was a bas-relief with a very interesting story. It was like the theme of the month. Ossip Zadkine proposed in every month, in every beginning of a new month, the students were to interpret the theme independently according to their abilities and talent. And this theme was prompted by the lectures and students' visit to the cinema to watch a popular film released in 1942 in the wartime. Le Visiteur du Soir, it was the name of the film, and the film was made in occupied Paris and had an allegorical meaning. A film director, Marcel Carnet, used Jacques Préveur's screenplay for the medieval costume drama in which evil forces turn young lovers into a stone form. We can also say that they became sculptures. The director of the film saw the German authorities occupied France as a force of evil, but Maire Männik has modeled the reliefs of her late visitor in the key of meeting a young couple, doing it in a completely modernist figurative language. Later, based on the same idea, she created some variation in different materials, especially ceramics. You can see it, and also there is a sketch with two young peoples. And the main work, the two bas-reliefs, are now in Tartu Art Museum. And some other sculptures creating during her studies are also based on the poetic themes of the months proposed by the teacher in the studio. However, the year 1955 and also 56, the years are financially successful. It's rare years. The Swedish state bought the bronze version of her semi-abstract work, The Cyclist. Here you can see it in the town, in Lutheran Park, and also the big version of the Cyclist was exposed in Rodin Museum Garden, and there are some drawings about this theme. Looking at the sculptures that have reached Estonian Art Museum, the most vivid composition we created while she was still living in Ossip Zadkine's sphere of influence. Ossip Zadkine had some good contacts with all his studio students, and here you can see two works. One of them, the first, is orchid, a woman-like orchid, a beautiful flower, and it was sold to a museum. in Le Havre, and the other work is in the same style. It is a woman playing lute, and these are with influences from the most beloved museum. Maire Männik visited often the Museum of Oriental Art, and maybe she got some influences because the sitting women both are like the Oriental feminine figures of Oriental saints. And here you can see the best from our museum. They are with beautiful shadows. All the lightening on this museum was put so that the shadows were like a part of this exposition, and the shadows are very beautiful. And from this time also, one of the best, I think, was the Closed Dream from '59. The Closed Dream was on the solo exhibition in Lund Art Museum, and Maire was on this picture with her little son Erkki. Maire had a son in the year '59, and in this first year in Erkki's childhood, Erkki traveled together with her mother in all the exhibition in Sweden. And A Closed Dream, especially the first version, it a picture from a newspaper. And also the other sculptures as harmonic game, rhythmic game, and so on, and the Oracle of Spring. The Oracle of Spring, they bear spiritual signs of the era in which Paris and other European metropolis were still dominated by the post-war wave of abstract expressionism. It was a very close and very understandable wave for Maire Männik, but unfortunately this fascination era began to end, and especially in such a big city like Paris. And I can show another world of her sculptures. However, there are many artists in the world who would remain in the once chosen satisfying style in her free work, and Maire Männik also remained faithful to abstract compositions enriched with realistic elements, of which in her 70s attention should be drawn to the utopian sculpture. Migratory birds, also the monument of birds. And you can see 3 different sculptures here, and she thought that nature reserved the sky for the birds, but even the sky is disturbed by man-made airplanes, and not only for the birds. And the author draws attention to the struggle of birds to survive in a world built full of high-rise cities and in the sky occupied by airplanes with their trajectories. Männik has created her world of birds and planes in 3 different dimensions. This theme seemed to be very important to her. And being closed, he was very close to the natural world view, but she also dreamed as a sculptor. She dreamed of gigantic architectural sculptures in the elements of which, and especially in the plains, could be located cafes. And what to do when the abstract expressionism, what was so close and dear for Maire Männik, it is not in mode. Maire Männik was a possibility to go to Sweden because he has Swedish citizenship, and in Sweden he can portray children. In the late 50s and 60s also we can find her in Sweden again, and her connection with exile Estonian art life in Sweden continues. She has been informed about all the cultural events taking place in Sweden, and her friends recommend her as a good portrait sculptor to familiar families. She has referred to portrayal of children in terms of living and honor in biblical terms. In the Bible, Jesus says, I am the bread of life. In a portrait film made about Maire Männik in 2000, Maire had called her work as a portrait sculpture as follows: it has been the bread of my life. She did not consider it right to take an ordinary job to make a living. Already at Tartu Art College in her youth, the principle was that an artist should dedicate only and only to his speciality. Only teaching the speciality was also recommended, and in Zadkine's studio also favored commitment to sculpting. However, portrait art was part of the traditional work of sculpture. Higher art, free sculptures, would not keep her and her little son, born in 1959, alive. Like many other artists, Maire Männik was not a very skilled manager. And in nowadays, most of all of Estonian sculptors and other artists, they are not the good managers. And in the late 50s, there was a remarkable change in the treatment of abstract art. All over the world, the elements of abstract art began to move into the field of applied art. Applied art in the second half of 50s, Maire Männik completed some decorative commissioning works like wall decorations and fireplace grills, which were made in bronze casting. And here you can see some drawings and also some wall objects and part of our exhibition, she did the little masks. She takes the mask from the portraits of children, and she can sell them. And also she did the tiny little sculptures for selling. It was the possibility to live. But there was also a remarkable object, a large commissioned work for the new hospital in Sweden, Sollefteå Hospital. According to Männik's design, wrought iron balustrade wire was made. It had 17 different motifs. The forging of the abstract ornament with its airy arabesque imagery still has a very modern effect even today. The large-scale work received considerably public attention in Sweden, and the artist was invited to the opening of the new hospital in 1961, and she participated with her little son Erki. Iron and bronze as well ceramic reliefs completed in these years, in 60s, could have led her work to a certain direction related to applied art. The beginning of the 60s was a time when the innovative abstract imagery was transferred to interior and situational art. Some of her ceramic reliefs and mosaics have reached private collections, but the current location of all of them has not yet been identified. However, I had seen some nice wall decoration in Erki Männik's house. And the year 1959 was again a turning point in the life of Maire Männik, because in summer Männik finally got her own studio in a historic artist quarter in Montparnasse. Here you can see the interior of the studio, and it is the address of 54 Roi de Montparnasse remained her residence and place of work until her death. In 1977, she got a much newer and more modern studio with basic sanitation on Colonel Pierre Avia, but the historic old studio stayed her home. She bravely fought against the demolition and modernization of the historic artist quarter. And her long-time close friend, journalist Manni Varep, one of the reflectors of her life and work in Estonian language Swedish media, has described this studio delicately as follows. It was without heating and sanitary equipment. They could be used in the stairwell or the street-side rental house, but the rent was suitable, low, and the position in Paris was central. However, it was in these modest circumstances that the 37-year-old Maire Männik had a son from long-time relationship with a publicist and Estonian language teacher in Paris, Monsieur Vahur Linnuste. and this companionship was blessed with the birth of a son, Erki. Since 61, pictures of the brilliantly smiling sculptor Maire Männik, accompanied by her regular travel companion, as the journalist writes, her little son appeared in the Swedish Estonian press. Almost all her sculptures, without a few exceptions, are made in plaster, and we mostly see the outdoor spirituality of the 50s, which she did not give up until the end of her creative path. I would like to highlight the sculptures back and forth, echo of the arcades, the oracle of springs, and so on. And Männik, in the mid-60s, ties between the Soviet Union and West Europe improved to such an extent that Maire Männik could now visit her mother in Estonia. It was another new thing in her life, but the visits, the meetings were complicated and under the supervision of the Soviet security authorities. I want, the time is going to end, I want to say something about this Maire Männik was so close, because she was so close to the old-fashioned expressionism, and why it was so. She did not want to relate herself with those new topics because they did not seem understandable for her, and she said, "It did not inspire me," she repeatedly said. The resource of left-wing counterculture, which became widespread in the theoretical development of European art in the 60s, and the approach of several new wave artists of the time of the views of the French Communist Party, may also have been unfamiliar for her. After all, the violent invasion of Estonia by the Communist Soviet Union before World War II and Estonia's post-war settlement for decades of isolation from the free world had shattered the safe life of her family and all her youth in Estonia and brought along her refugee status. It can be said that the refugee artist of Männik's generation, all the generation, remained in exile even inside the invading new art phenomena. And about the new studio. Here is a new studio in Rue de Colonel Pierre Aviat, and the 70s find Maire Männik in this new studio, but she kept her old studio as her home. She had no an apartment, a living apartment. She lived in studios, in the old studio in Rue de Montparnasse, and also here is the new studio. As Männik began to perform regularly at the annual Salon suit in the city of Issy-les-Moulineaux. And the Salon Sud exhibition organized by the city of Issy-les-Moulineaux, which was organized by Männik's good friend, sculptor Jean-Marie Bechet. New acquaintances were formed and the social circle of Maire Männik was renewed here. And the exhibition continues here also at the Swedish Cultural Center. I show the sculptures from her old age. They were two very beautiful, but we can say that they are not in the same way as the sculptures from 50s. And here you can see the portraits. The best of them was the portrait of Eugène Ionesco and also the portrait of Herman Talvik. They were touchable and very beautiful. And now, in every artist's life, there were some surprises. And it was the big surprise, not the little one. Maire Männik was an author of a monument of General Philippe Leclerc in 1889. And also he did another portrait monuments for a Swedish little town, Ljungby Library in Småland. It is a little place, and a Swedish writer, Folke Fridell, was born in this Ljungby. And in Ljungby, all the public, they were very much how to say it, they were not the art people and not very much at home with modern art events, and they said that the glasses of the writer, it is a top of art. And the General Philippe Leclerc is a legendary liberator of Paris and Strasbourg from German occupation. And the order for the monument was timed to celebrate in 45th anniversary of the liberation of Paris in August 25 in the year 89. Such ideological commissions usually push the author into a very controlled framework, but Maire Männik created a charming, youthful half-figure wearing a French army uniform, and the face is modeled with portrayal precision, bold, with a slight smile on the eyes and lips. And the general's portrait bust was completed in Maire Männik's studio a year before, in 88, and the opening of the monument in front of the city government building was organized as a highly solemn national patriotic military event. It was a big surprise all for Maire Männik, and the former minister the mayor of Issy-les-Moulineaux, André Santini, personally thanked her with a huge, very huge bouquet of flowers. And now the hour is opened, but I had to say some words about the 80s. The 80s, there was another surprise. Maire Männik found herself as a medal creation artist, and the artistic medals are precious small works of arts, and we have a lot of medals on this exhibition in Estonian Art Museum. And not only the medals, but also the big ones, the artistic works for the medals made in Paris Monayer. Männik has recalled that Pierre Dehaye, an excellent expert and publicist who worked as a director of Monayer from 62 to 84, highly valued the development of the artistic medals, and Männik's cooperation with him in the first half of 90s led to the completion of several commemorative medals as commissioned by the Monayer de Paris. And the last word, I feel it is her signature. I will end my presentation with Maire Männik's sentence in which she expresses her opinion about Paris. She indicates how important it is for an artist to work in the World Arts Center. And she said, Paris was as I imagined it to be. Paris is somehow a wonderfully, creatively inspiring city. The wonderfully, creatively inspiring city where creative work is done with such ease. Once Somerset Maugham could have said that Paris was a city where thoughts could be thought up to the end, and that is true. A lot of people come here in Paris and live full of ideas, but the ideas wither like farewell flowers on the way back, and so on. I apologize, I can't speak understandable and good English.
On the contrary, it was perfectly understandable. Thank you very much, Juta Kivimäe, for this lecture, which made us discover this very, very surprising work indeed. I must say the works of the 50s and 60s, mid-50s until the 60s is very surprising. And it does bear nevertheless some resemblances or connections to other works. And I'm curious about what influences or connections she could have built. But I don't want to take too much of your time. And I'd like to check first if there are some questions in the room before I ask some. Maybe I'll just ask it first. I was curious, so I have many questions, but two of them are, first, apparently there's a turn in her work in the late 1950s and 1954, 1955, and we should turn to those really constructions rather than sculpture, in the building of themselves, which you commented with the metal rods and etc., seems different from the more strict Zadkine influence. And so I was curious to know how you explain it, what could have prompted this change. And also, I wondered if she was connected or looking at or influenced by, in any way you'll tell us, by other sculptures that at the time in the 50s were interested in surrealism. Many of her sculpture reminded me some aspects of Maria Martin's sculptures, something that is between figural representation and something that's more related to the dream, and we've seen that the subject of dream itself is at the core of some of sculptures. So that's just one name I'm thinking of, but maybe she could have been connected to other sculptures, and I wondered, if, for instance, if she was interested in or influenced by or in contact with surrealism or other sorts of contemporary art to her.
Yes, her works are very, how to say it, I had never seen before the contact with Erkki Männik, something like Maire Männik's works. And even they were in bad situation, I saw that they are rare independent sculptures. And to think about that she came to Paris from deep of north, from Estonia and Sweden, and at this time there was no similar works in the exhibitions. And in Paris, Ossip Zadkine was the oldest of the professors. She had no other teachers in Paris, but I think she was very much talented and very open mind, and she visited many of sculptures exhibitions together with the atelier students and together with Zadkine. And as we visited some years ago Zadkine's museum, I can see the influence of Zadkine is very strong. And about the other artists, I don't have to say something, because in here we saw the fragile artworks of Giacometti, and the technique was very similar. So I think that it was only not a long time, the 50s and the beginning of 60s, she was in such a wave. And after that, Maire lost his tutor in 67 when Zadkine died, and she stayed very alone. She has some friends in this Montparnasse quarter, but not such kind of great sculptures. I think that Maire Männik as a phenomena is very valuable for us in Estonia, but maybe we have to do a lot of work to introduce her in around the world too.
And we've seen pictures of her studio and at various times of her career, and it was apparently plenty of books. Do we know the content of her library, what she read, what catalogs she might have had? Do you have?
Yes,
Yeah?
she had a library in the new atelier, and she had interesting also in how to say, she was interesting in pedagogical teams, and especially the I lost my mind. Especially the anthropology. He had several books of Margaret Mead here in her library, and of course some books about the great Parisian sculptures, and also in his late years he was very much interested in metal art, and the metal art with a large meaning of cultural history.
Okay. Thank you. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions, que ce soit dans la salle ou dans le live? On prend aussi les questions qui seraient posées dans le live. Oui.
I don't know about this, about the wishes, because she didn't keep diaries, and she didn't write some scripts or so, but we had we find in Erki Männik's archive a lot of papers with memories, and I asked when did she write them, these papers, and it was in connecting with this film. An Estonian film director did the film 26 minutes only, and he filmed Rain Raamat here in Paris in the year 1999, and the film was on the screens in 2000. And for this film, Maire had to remember all kind of facts for her studying years and her opinions from the past and so on. And these scripts are very much interesting. And the copies are now in our archive in Tallinn.
Okay, thank you very much.
C'est l'exposition qu'avait organisée Juta Kivimäe qui a attiré notre attention sur Maire Männik et le souhait d'en savoir davantage à l'occasion d'une conférence qu'on a invitée.
Yes.
Vous l'avez vu, est-ce ou pas? Non, je n'ai pas vu. Non, on l'a découvert après qu'elle ait été organisée.
Tarah Karasyov was a little boy when you came to Paris with your mother, and I know that you had deep contacts with Maire Männik in your childhood, and you called Maire Auntie Ladybird.
Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions ou remarques? Non. Je vous propose qu'on finisse sur ces mots en vous remerciant chaleureusement pour cette découverte que vous nous permettez, parce que je crois que vraiment pour beaucoup c'était une découverte et sans doute que cette présentation augure d'autres travaux. Vraiment, je crois que la période de la fin des années 50 aux années 60 a quelque chose de très singulier qui mérite le regard et sans doute des travaux. So, thank you very much. Sorry, I was talking in French.
I thank you for this possibility to act here in your very beautiful house and to say something about Maire Männik. And I thank you, Erkki Männik, for your great gift to our government.
I want to thank you and your colleague Isabelle, who is present, who dealt with organizing this exhibit. Restore my mother's sculptures for
Yes.
15 years or more. It took a very long time, and this is only a short summary of all the jobs that has been done for 15 years, so to say.
Yes. And our best restorer. Our restorer is sitting here, and she with her husband, they came from Prague Art Academy as a sculpture restorers, especially to our museum, and I don't know what we can do without them, without this couple.
You just have to imagine a statue like the statue on the picture, how to restore it from the outside and get inside, dealing with rust, crumbling plaster. Très compliqué de restaurer des statues en plâtre avec une armature en fer qui rouille à l'intérieur.
On est familiarisé on est familiarisé aux problématiques que vous avez peut-être. Merci beaucoup de votre contribution et puis d'avoir permis cela également. So thank you very much again, Juta Kivimäe. So next meeting for us is on the 20th of December for a lecture in French at that time on Paris créole, sur le Paris créole donné par Christelle Lozère. Rendez-vous donc à l'Institut Giacometti pour cette prochaine conférence de l'École des Modernités et merci d'avoir suivi celle-ci. À très bientôt.